South Carolina, and he is fifth generation in working with the Salvation Army. So at that time is Major Vic Tidman.
Thank you. Let me check my mic. Is it working okay? Everybody can hear me? Usually when I do one of these little talks, I bring my wife. I don't know how many of you guys know this, but I have a trophy wife. We're newlyweds. We got married in 1973, and we're still kind of going through that adjustment period. But she just had a bionic knee put in, so half of her is moving faster than the other half. I didn't want to show up with just half of a wife tonight, so I've asked my board chairman, who has just had a bionic shoulder put in, if he'll help me with what I'm doing tonight. I don't think this is going to be a typical experience for you, because the Salvation Army has spared no expense. On having fabulous gifts for you guys to take home tonight. You can answer a few questions. Now, I don't know, I of course remembered Valentine's Day, but I'm sure that maybe one or two of you might have forgotten Valentine's Day this year. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to make this up with your bride or with your significant other. I've got wonderful gifts. Let me show you one of them here. You can take this home tonight and give it to your significant other. Wouldn't that be wonderful? See? And the person who's going to be in charge of giving these out is Lion Pat Tillman.
Thank you, Major.
Don't stick one in your pocket.
Yeah.
I've got a great animal.
By the way, all those stories that he's been telling you about how he's doing Salvation Army work so he can't come to Lions, I'm not going to say any more about that. Okay, so we're going to do a little test here. If you know the answer, just raise your hand. If you know the answer, raise your hand. The Salvation Army began its work, and these are all multiple guess. That's the best kind I liked when I was in school, questions I could guess at. Salvation Army began its work, A, in the north end of Alaska in 2002, B, in the west end of the East Indies in 1309, C, in the south end of the North Pole in 1953, or D, in the east end of London in 1864. Who knows? Yes, sir.
London.
D, okay, all right. Here's a winner right here.
I get a happy wife.
Okay. Here in Salisbury, the Salvation Army started its work in A, 1984, B, 2001, C, 1803, D, 1913. Right here. D, 1913. That's right. Oh, and it looks good there, too. Yeah. The Salvation Army does its work because A, someone has to do it. B, we're the best suited. C, it's easy to get the funding. D, or D, our faith in Jesus Christ. Somebody has been paying attention, I'll tell you. Okay. How about this one? The Salvation Army is principally or primarily A, a charity, B, a thrift store, C, a Boys and Girls Club, or D,
All the above.
a Christian denomination or church. The Salvation Army is primarily a Christian denomination or church. The guys like me that wear these uniforms that have red on their shoulders are ordained ministers. We call them commissioned officers. We go to seminary and we have all the normal training that an ordained minister has. People often say, well, what kind of church are you? And are there any Methodists here? Yeah, it's your fault. If you're a Methodist, it's your fault, because see, the guy that started the Salvation Army was a Methodist minister who had a real desire to meet the needs of the poor. He was a kind of a wild-looking guy. I don't know if you can see his picture here. Yeah. That's his picture, and I've got some pages over here that you may be interested in. His name was William Booth, and he started the Salvation Army in the east end of London, along a stretch that they called the 20-mile waste, which was basically a 20-mile road that had, I think they said over 200 gin palaces on it. Alcoholism was rampant in his day. The Salvation Army began about the time that we were having our Civil War here in the United States. And it was right down on the Thames in London. I heard somebody talk about that they went to London. Who was it said that they were in London? Yeah. Said he was in London recently. So down on the Thames, why do you think that the bad places were down next to the river? Because if you go there today, that's where all the rich people live. Do you have any idea why the bad houses were all down near the river?
Everything drained into the river.
Sewage runs downhill. And in that day, if you were wealthy, you lived up on top of the hill. And if you were poor, you lived down near the river. So that was down where there was a lot of drug addiction and alcoholism. There was no minimum drinking age, so you actually had children before the age of puberty becoming alcoholics. The minimum age of consent in Booth's day, the big argument is if they were going to raise the age of consent from 12 to 14, which meant that a young lady could be pulled into prostitution as early as 12 years old. And that did happen quite often, and it's hard for us to imagine. And there are all other kind of problems. And I'd like to tell you that the Salvation Army eliminated all those problems. We don't have problems with drug addiction or alcoholism or with sexual immorality, but we still have lots of problems today that the Salvation Army tries to address. When I left the club a little while ago, I did a head count real quick of the downtown club. We had 70 children in there doing different types of activities. So while we're here, there's another 70 kids off the street at the Salvation Army right downtown, well, 5 minutes from here. And then, of course, across town at the Hazel Center, there's probably another 55 or 60 kids over there as we're speaking. So right now, in this community, the Salvation Army is trying to impact the lives of over 100 children. But I'm getting away from my test. And I don't want to, I've got a lot of these gifts to give away. Last year, the Salvation Army in Salisbury, A, helped hurting families with utilities and rental assistance. B, provided food baskets to feed thousands of people on Maryland's lower eastern shore. C, delivered Christmas gifts to over 850 children. Or D, all of the above. Who was it? There you go. Okay.
Dan's gonna be proud of you.
The 3 Salvation Army youth clubs involve over 1,000 children in youth sports, swimming, and character building programs. Send kids to sleep away at summer camp in northern West Virginia. Provide tutoring lessons to help poor children succeed in school. Or D, all of the above.
All the above.
Okay. Now here's something that you might be interested in. The government provides all of the Salvation Army's operating budget, most of the Salvation Army's operating budget,
Nothing.
half of the Salvation Army's operating
Nothing.
budget, less than 2% of the Salvation Army's operating budget. D, less than 2%. We have 2 more questions. United Way provides A, all of the Salvation Army's operating budget, B, most of the Salvation Army's operating budget, C, half of the Salvation Army's budget, or D, less than 5% of our budget for operations.
Less than
D,
5%.
it's less than 5%. Most of the money that we use, the vast majority of the money we use are donations that people just give us. Some of you have sent me checks in the mail. We use those monies to help pay for what we do. Some of you have rang the kettle. Most of you have rang the kettle and have watched people put donations in that kettle. You know the average Salvation Army donation in the kettle is 78 cents. That's our average donation. If you rang the kettle, you know all those little kids that come up and put 5 pennies in. When you run the average all the way through, it's about 78 cents. So when you think about that, keep in mind that this year we set a record in what we raised here in Salisbury. You were part of helping set that record. Don't ask me how much. Somebody already has. I don't give that away until right at the beginning of the next season. But we raised over $250,000 this year. 78 cents at a time. It's really an amazing thing. The Salvation Army does almost all of its fundraising backwards from what most other agencies do. Most other agencies are very interested in the big donor, and we're very interested in the small donor. So we have a lot of small donors that help the Salvation Army, and we really don't have a lot of big pocket donors. Now, if there's a big pocket donor here, I'd be glad to talk with you because we have some real challenges here in Salisbury that we're trying to meet, and in the lower eastern shore area. But we're very gratified by the fact that an awful lot of people help the Salvation Army. And I know from just conversations that I've had that there be folks here that played in the Salvation Army when you were a kid. And some of you have had children that have been in the Salvation Army that have been there because of guys like you that stood out on the corner and rang the bell or put a check in an envelope or did some other things to help the Army succeed. Here's an interesting question. Of the income, and this is the last one, of the income raised on the Lower Eastern Shore, what percentage of the Salvation Army income goes direct service to individuals? Okay. A, 25%, B, 50%, C, 75%, or D, 89%?
89.
89%. Out of every dollar that we raise in the Salvation Army, 89% goes to direct service. Now, for all of those of you that didn't get one of these wonderful gifts, I have kind of a door prize for you. And it looks an awful lot like these. Matter of fact, it looks exactly like this. So Pat has an extra gift for every one of you. Just make sure you see him before you go. And now I want to take a few minutes just to answer any questions that you might have that we've missed in our test. Maybe it'll help with the test for the next group that I talked to. Is there anything you always wanted to know about the Salvation Army but were afraid to ask? And if I don't know the answer, I'll just say I don't know the answer. So, yes, sir.
Ryan mentioned that you were posted in St. Petersburg.
Yes.
That was with the Salvation Army?
Yes.
So the Salvation Army is international?
128 countries. And I spent 6 years in St. Petersburg, 6 of the coldest years that I've ever spent anywhere. It's a very cold part of Russia. I tell people that I wasn't on the Arctic Circle, but I could see it from my house. I looked out the window. It was a fascinating experience to go there. The Salvation Army, for some reason, felt like that they needed me there, and they asked me if I would go, and I went. I didn't have to go. I didn't have to go. So yes, sir.
What's the longest time period that you spent in any one location?
Well, that would be in St. Petersburg, Russia. I was there for 6 years. I've had appointments that have been as short as 2 years, and St. Petersburg was as long as 6 years. I like to tell everybody that my longest appointment was the 2 years I spent in Fairfax, Virginia. And one of my shortest appointments was the 6 years I spent in St. Petersburg, Russia. But the average for Salvation Army officers is 3 years. I've been here a little bit over 2, which would normally be bad news, but I retire in 2 years. So I'm hoping that the Salvation Army, if they don't mess with me this year, then I'll probably get to finish my time out here in Salisbury. And I'm hoping that I'll get to do that. Yes, sir.
Did you speak the native language when you lived in St. Petersburg?
Я говорю чуть-чуть по-русски. In other words, I just enough to get in trouble most of the time. I could probably get directions to the metro station, or I could find out where the bathroom was. Toilet is the most important word that you need to know. When you're wondering, and just kind of toilet. And they'll usually point you the direction that you need to go. But no, I had to have translation for all my preaching, for all my speaking. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a little kind of a little interesting story. We have a young lady that was my translator in Russia. And when I came this way, she went to Australia to work on youth work training for the Salvation Army. She went to school in Australia. I told you, 128 countries. And so now she's back here with us on a special program that our territorial headquarters is paying for, helping us with our youth work at the Salvation Army. So, and she speaks Russian very well. So, yes, sir.
Is the bell ringing done in all countries, all 128?
Well, that actually was one of the reasons why they sent me to Russia, is because I've been known over the years for having really strong bell ringing programs, and they had no kettles in Russia. They had never done it before, but they do now. They were ringing kettles this year in every city, and they were ringing for 4 weeks, which was pretty good when you think about the fact that 7 years ago they never had even thought about spacing. So we were really glad to do that. One of in the Salvation Army, you have 2 types of areas. You have what are called grant-aided or GAT territories, which and then you have fit territories, which are territories that help the poor territories. Russia's a poor territory, and they weren't raising any of their own money. So one of the reasons that they sent me there was to help them start to do some things to raise their own fund. Yes, sir.
Who was the one that started the bell?
That started in McPhee was his name in San Francisco. He wanted to have a dinner for the homeless in the San Francisco area, and he put a pot. They had a big pot right at the end of the landing where people came off of the San Francisco ferry, and he did a promotion to keep the pot boiling in order to have enough money to feed the homeless in the city. And all the other Salvation Army officers thought he was nuts, and he was a little nuts. All of us in the Army that have succeeded have been a little nuts. And he succeeded, was able to do a dinner for 100 people, and the next year there were 20 officers in San Francisco all out ringing bells at different places, and one of those got moved to New York, and then it moved to New York, and then it spread all over the United States. But the U.S. was the first country to do the kettle. Yes, sir.
Two questions. What is the?
No, I'm sorry, you're only allowed one question.
One B.
Yeah.
How many people in like the Salisbury area did ring the bell? And secondly, what percent out of your budget is taken care of by the kettles?
Our budget right now is about $1.6 million, between $1.6 million and $1.7 million. We raised $250,000. Don't ask me to do percentages. I did okay with English in school. Math was not going to happen. The number of people we had over 200 volunteer groups or individuals helping to ring, but now that's
Groups or individuals?
group or individuals. But I don't always have a group count. So I really couldn't. I would anything I told you.
We were like 2,100.
Yeah. So that, but you only count as one.
Right, exactly.
So when you start thinking about the number of different clubs and stuff like that participated, we have individuals. We have some really dedicated individuals, and if any of you or your representative has come to our Christmas kickoff breakfast, we have one or two individuals that ring hour after hour after hour at the kettle, and then we have some very large groups. The hospitals ring, both here in Salisbury and over toward Ocean City. So Purdue rings. We have some other large groups that ring. So I need to figure that out some way, because that would be a good figure for me to be able to say. But we have over 200 groups and individuals. Any other questions? Okay, you guys did really good. You all passed the test. But I want to read you. What this crazy guy was telling you about, what the founder of Salvation. I wanted to leave you with this thought, and I have some of these over here because people always ask me for them. And the mission statement of the Salvation Army, it's very colorful, and our magazine, The War Cry. I didn't bring enough for everybody because I've learned in the past that not everybody wants one, and I don't want to give a bunch of magazines out that people just take home and throw away. But if you want one, there's one right there, and if they run out, just see Pat. He'll be able to take care of anything that you need, I'm sure. Yeah. But let me share with you the words of the founder, the man we call the founder, and the first general of the Salvation Army. We only have one at a time, only one general at a time. So he said, "While women weep as they do now, I'll fight. While little children grow hungry as they do now, I'll fight. While men go to prison in and out as they do now, I'll fight. While there is a drunkard left, while there is a poor lost girl on the streets, while there remains one dark soul without the light of God, I'll fight. I'll fight to the very end." And I want to thank you, gentlemen, for giving the Salvation Army the opportunity to fight here in Salisbury. God bless you.